Africans are not violent. African migrants are not violent. It is just unfortunate that we don't tell our own stories. Until we start to tell our own stories, again, as a collective, I'm telling a Liberian story, a Nigerian story, a Zambian story, but I'm telling our stories as collective.
I'll go to the OAC. I'd like to take me back to how it all began. Was it out of frustration or out of inspiration, or it was a necessity that needed to happen?
Out of all of them, every time one or two of our sons are involved in antisocial behavior, it will take the media. The danger of it is that it makes ordinary citizens who want to accept us to fear us. There was nobody willing to put their hands up to speak against this. I thought there was a need to have people that we can jointly or collectively work together as a community.
This feels like a cliche now. Africa unites, Africa this, when Africa that. How far are we from actualizing that?
We are very far away.
Hello, Joe.
Hello, Emmanuel.
How are you today?
Very well. Yourself?
I'm all right. How's the day been?
Not bad.
Quite a busy day, I would assume.
It's good.
Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It really does mean a lot to me that you made that time to be here today. I know you're quite a busy person. Taking that time to be here today means the world to me.
Thanks for the invitation, Emmanuel.
Some listeners are going to turn into this podcast while they're on their way to school, on their way to work, in the gym, probably just driving one place or the other. But what would you like them to understand about you as a person, Joseph?
My name is Joe Tuazama. I'm originally from Africa, and I've been here for some good number of years. I want to be remembered as a good father, a community person, and an African. I think those things are important to me than any other thing.
What would you like them to take home from this conversation?
Look, it is important for people to understand that there must be a time that we have to think in the future. We can't think always today, or we cannot think always in the past. I say this to mean that the African community in Western Australia, in Australia at large, has to start looking ahead. It is very important because some of us will stay here, will retire here, will age here, and the actions we take today will determine how we age, how we enjoy our old age, how our young men and women turn to become responsible African Australians. And so when these conversations are brought on the table, they are very, very essential for all of us.
If I were to ask someone very close to you, perhaps your wife or your best friend, what would be the one thing they say you struggle the most with?
I think I struggle with keeping to myself because I grew up the very challenging way, just like any other African young man or woman who have experienced a lot. And based on that experience, I always like to put myself in a position of someone when they need help. So keeping to myself and not wanting to help other people, I struggle with that. And my wife, for example, being a non-African who grew up in different part of the world and in different shape, how she sees things, she wonders why this man always wants to be there to help. Why is it when there are issues about other people, he brings it to his own proximity and wants to make sure that it is addressed. So I struggle with that. And that's something a lot of people close to me know.
I can agree with that. You just talked about your experience, Can you talk more about that experience you just mentioned? Let's go back into your journey, how you got into Australia, the experience that have got you to become the person you are today, talking about the struggle, about you not wanting to keep to yourself, wants to always go out to help people.
Look, one thing I want to tell people is that it is very good for you to know where you grew up. And when you go back to have memories with friends and other people you grew up with, those are all beautiful compositions of life. But for someone like myself and too many other people here today, we didn't have that opportunity. At a very young age, my country went to war, and I fled to Ivory Coast, where I grew up. I spent literally many years. And now, I was born in Liberia. My both parents are Liberians. I am a Liberian. But I turned to know more about other countries than Liberia. And living in a strange land comes with its own challenges. And there were so many challenges in those countries. And like we can see on the televisions, we read in newspapers, being a refugee is a tough challenge. So you have to experience and see a lot of things. And based on those things, when I had the opportunity to come over here, I thought it will be good to give back to people, particularly to people who have come, like myself, those who are struggling to speak English, people who are struggling to navigate the system, people who are struggling to settle in, and other Africans, young men and women who are struggling with the culture, who are finding their identities. So these things, they continue to motivate me today. And as I live, there will always be motivational forces for me.
For many Australians, they don't understand what it means to be a refugee, what it means to have lived through war. Because if you live in this part of the world, it's not something that you would have. I don't think Australia's ever had to go to war, apart from, of course, the World War II or those 50, 60 years ago. But in recent history, there hasn't been any such thing. For someone that doesn't understand what it means to come from a refugee background, can you visually explain what that means? What would be the mindset of a kid taken out from war, placed in a safe place, perceived safe place, but then still struggles with the trauma of going through all of those?
Look, the first thing is you are leaving your precious home, your family, your relatives, and going to a new place where you don't know people. And you are not going with your will that I want to move to this country. You are forced to. And you go with nothing. You have to start from zero. And particularly for our situation, we came from Liberia, where they spoke English. And we went to Cote d'Ivoire, where they spoke French. So our parents could no longer go to work and put food on our table. So every one of us depended on something that we didn't see. So that's the gravity of it, because our parents were men and women who were capable of putting food on our tables and taking full responsibility for us. And once we became refugees, those opportunities disappeared.
What does it mean to be both African and Australian in modern day Australia?
It's a beautiful conversation about being an African and being an Australian. At this stage, I think that two combinations, the combination is yet to hold, to be an African and to be an Australian. Maybe in the future, when we get to that multicultural potential as Australians or as Australia, then we will start to find that balance of being an African and being an Australian, or being an African Australian.
But there is a term called African Australians.
Yes, there's a term called African Australian, which is good. But what I still struggle to understand is being able to digest being Australian and being African and having that fine balance to say, today I can act like an Australian. Tomorrow I can act like an African. For now, it's just a nomenclature because it has to also relate to our appearance, which is our color, because we are of African descent, so we are being referred to as African Australian. Until we can reach to that place where we can feel like, look, I can be here and feel completely Australian. That's a place, that's why some of us do what we do in the community, because there's a serious need for it.
I'd like to go deeper into that. Do you think the government understands that that is just a nomenclature, that that's actually not a thing?
The government represents the people. And people in the government, they are also politicians. So they have responsibility to us that elect them. Understanding is another thing, and having the lived experience is another thing. We hope to see more people in those decision-making positions who have had the lived experience of what you and myself have experienced or are experiencing. When we start having a lot of those people in decision-making role, then we will now start to speak, decide, run things the way that is inclusive, more inclusive. At this stage, there's been significant progress, but there's still a lot to be done.
What do you need to see, or what do you think needs to be done for that to be a thing?
I'll give you one example. When you send your children to school in Africa, you send them for the school to help to discipline them. And the school has a responsibility to do this to ensure that these young men and women become responsible citizens. So the parents gave them the full responsibility. Here, it has to be a collective approach. And in this collective approach, most of us from Africa, we don't fit in. Because when it is time for an African parent to play his or her role, that's where they struggle. Because everything here has laws. And those laws sometimes don't favor our parenting style. So when these young men and women get into trouble, and we are approached as community leaders, when we speak to the parents, the first thing they do is the school. When the schools and the African parents start to have that common ground, that understanding of how the parents can play their roles and the schools can play their roles, and our young people who are in the middle, they are being beneficiary of the both culture or system, then we are getting somewhere. But as it stands, 90% of the young men and women who get into trouble from our community, when we speak to their parents, they lean towards the school saying, we couldn't do this. When we wanted to do this, there was a mandatory report from the school. There was this, there was that. So there are so many examples, but I think the government is doing a lot that in coming years, we will get there.
I want to go a bit further. Australia won't be the first multicultural country facing this issue. We've got countries in Europe, the US, and Canada. Are there examples you've seen in these places that you think Australia can adopt?
Look, every country has its own way of doing things. When you look at Europe, Canada, and the Americas, these countries are more closer to Africa. And the diversity and inclusions in some of those countries, they are at high levels. And in fact, they started living with us long time ago. Remember, it is just in the last 20 years that we have had this amount of influx from Africa. So why they are learning about us, we are also learning about them. But there are also some countries around the globe that are doing very well. They're doing very well because they have invested in getting close to these people, working with the communities to make sure that they feel at home. But I think we can get there in the soon future.
I'll go to the OAC. I'd like to take me back to AC was 10 sometime this year. That's actually a big deal, I guess, for me personally. But I'd like to take me back to the moment how it all began. Now, I recall in 2014, when OAC was going to be commissioned, and I remember we were also going to commission Afro-Pacific, and then you had a chat asking, look, instead of having two different events, why don't we just put everything together? I felt that was a very important and a very thoughtful reach out. And I saw for me someone that was less interested in himself, but more in bringing everyone together. Now, take me back to how it all began. Was it out of frustration or out of inspiration, or it was a necessity that needed to happen?
Out of all of them, because remember, we came here and there were some Africans that have been here for a very long time. And before the OAC, there was an African community here in WA. And as I have been told, they were doing great as well. But for some reason, the organization wind down. And it wind down at a time when the African population was increasing here in WA. And there were many times that we needed to have spoken for ourselves. When reports came out that a man went to Mirabuka and robbed somebody, and the description fitted us so well, there was a need that we speak and say, you cannot describe somebody like that. When you do so, you incriminate all of us. There were times that people generalized us when there were wrongs. And when we walk past some people, they were afraid. And when there were times that we needed to address some treatment that were not fair for us, and we had nobody to do so. And particularly there was an incident that occurred. I think it was around just the 2000, it could be around between 2012 to 2014 there, just in between there. These young men of African origin in UK have brutally killed a young British soldier who was finishing his shift and coming out of the barracks. I believe he has already changed his uniform. And when this incident occurred, the attitude the African gentleman displayed didn't go well with a lot of people globally, even a lot of Africans. And at that time, there was a journalist here who is one of those renowned Western Australian journalists. He went down to Mirabuka and interviewed some of our young men. And those young men, I think some of them were known to the justice system. And out of frustration, they said a lot of negative things to this journalist. And the journalist got an article to write. And that article was entitled, African Youth Are Time Bombs. And it sparked a lot of controversy. I recall that I got a call from someone from the police and said, this gentleman wants to publish this article, and we think as a community people should stop him from publishing this article because it sends very wrong message. I used to be president of the Liberian community at the time, and I said, look, I'm not a leader of the African community. Have you tried to reach to them? They said, look, we call people all over the place. Then they passed me this gentleman contact, and I reached out to him. He was very professional and told me, look, thank you, but it is too late, Joe. The article has been released. And yes, it was released. Once it was released, I started getting calls from media institutions wanting us to address this issue. And in that process, there were some people who were leaders outside of the African community because they couldn't reach anybody, who made some comments. And those comments didn't settle well with someone like myself and a few other people. So we came out and said, look, this is not right. So we managed to do some interviews with, I think, Channel 9, with the ABC radio. We organized some elders, and we debunked the article and said, this does not represent us. As Africans, we are not violent. We are not, as this article has depicted us. And from there, I started talking to a few Africans who've been here a long time to say, why is it that we don't have a functioning African community here? And everybody was blaming somebody. So I then started doing consultation and brought a few group of Africans together so that we know what happened to that African community, that it wind them, that when we organize one, we put in a process to mitigate whatever has happened. So that's how the OAC was formed. And it has grown. And I think it's in good hands at this moment as well.
I'll go back to the story. That's quite a profound story. I remember coming here 2014. I don't think I met that story. But how did that make you feel, being painted in that light?
Look, it troubles everybody who came here to stay, because I was thinking of my sons and daughters. How would they be visioned tomorrow? How would they be looked at? And particularly, what really bothered me at the time was the fact that there was nobody willing to put their hands up to speak against this. I thought there was a need to have people that we can jointly or collectively work together as a community. And in that process, one of the elders that I met was Peter Ibekwe. He used to be very involved with the ethnic community councils in WA, and we started having these conversations. But what matters to us today is that if somebody writes such an article or somebody speaks like that about us, we're able to debunk them as a community. From that collective approach, we got an organization, we got a community that can say, no, we disagree with you.
I would assume building the OAC, starting and running it for, I think, 7 years, you were the president, if I recall correctly, wouldn't have come easy. At what cost? What did it cost you to build for 7 years?
Look, when you start anything new, there's always oppositions. There are always challenges, just as when we started the OAC. I was much younger. I was still a university student. And I was not one of the very educated Africans around here. So a young man waking up and saying, we're going to do this. A lot of people didn't believe it. They saw the disbelief. They didn't see the potential. They didn't see the capability of this young man. They saw him as somebody who couldn't deliver this. But through this journey, I also came across some very supportive people who themselves were sitting down and wanting this to happen. But I also learned a few things on the journey, that those African, Pan-Africanists who were abroad long time, like the Kwame Nkrumah, and the list go on, that insisted that Africa must unite were not wrong. Till today's date, Africa needs to unite. Even here, overseas, if we want to make progress in this place, if we want to make impact, we have to be collective. Individually, we are all doing brilliant. We are doing great. But there is a need for a collective achievement. There's a need for collective brilliance. So, one main thing that struck me was how we sometimes oppose each other. Not because something is wrong, but because it is not me. How we oppose something, knowing that it's very good, it's the right thing, and without knowing about it, we just decide to oppose it because we are not the one doing it. So those things were challenges that we faced down the road. But we also learned that if you want to do something good, you have to stay focused. And we had people around us as well who bought the idea, who saw the vision and said, no matter what, we got to do it together.
Well, at the time, I remember vividly, of course, had quite a few conversations. I was also somewhere around the corners, I think I've been there from the get-go, not an executive, but I think I've been around the OAC for this long. It's interesting looking back and trying to picture quite a few people then, and not many of them are here now. Well, thank God for the grace to keep going, I remember at the time, one of the big allegations at the time was the government has invested so much money into the OAC, and Joe and his crew wouldn't, let me just put in a nutshell, some misappropriation of funds and things like that. I know you're laughing about it now. I know at the time it wasn't funny. Can you address those?
Look, when the OAC was established, the Minister of Multicultural Interest at the time was Mordern. And he was very supportive of us establishing the OAC. OAC did not get any substantial funding throughout the administration of Mordern because there were a lot of fight. There were a lot of internal fight amongst us as Africans. And the brand was not known. It was not trusted. It was just until maybe a year before I left the OAC started to be funded. But I can tell you here today, there has been no time over these 10 years that OAC was established. It has received a strict 300,000 grant, even a strict 200,000 grant from any government, be it state or federal government, that went into the OAC's account. So some of these things, people try to say these things, and it's just the way the life, that's the way things go. People will say things. OAC has a financial policy. Joe Tuazama, being the president, can only approve. The treasurer will do the processing, and the vice president for administration will pay. If the vice president for administration does the processing, the treasurer will pay. And not coming from the financial background, my strength was to look at things and approve, because in my daily job, that's one of the things I do. And I had executives that were elected with me, and they were all people who work as professionals, and they have integrities to protect, including myself. So we would have been silly if we ever thought of going to the OAC account to take money or to misappropriate any fund.
How was the OAC funded then, prior to getting funding from the government?
When the OAC was established, everybody at OAC volunteered. So we were all volunteers. In fact, the first funding that we ever got to run the Jumbo Africa at the North Bridge Plaza there, that money came through the African Women Council. That was from OMI.
The auspiced OAC?
Yes.
Okay.
So we didn't get trusted until so many years. The biggest funding we ever received during those years were 5,000, 10,000, and they were mainly for festivals and events that we ran. So there were no source of income. We were all volunteering, but we had committed men and women who believe in the ideology of having an African community in WA who were willing to give it their best, their time. So the OAC has struggled financially. Even till today's date, the OAC continues to struggle financially.
What's been the hardest lesson you've learned running the OAC this 10
The
years?
higher lesson that I have learned is don't expect anything in reward when you lead people, when you serve people. Because the very people that you advocate for, the very people that you serve, the very person that you can do something good for today can just change tomorrow. Because we got too much expectation and we always expect. And it is not just Africans. I think it's human nature. So if you go into these endeavors with the ideology or with the mindset of being appreciated for everything you do, of being praised for everything you do, you won't do it. There are times that people who have been sitting home and they are struggling with issues, and government departments and other people refer them to me and say, look, Joe, we think this person needs help. Can you please help them? And I get involved to help them. They even take me to the court. They sue me for absolutely no reason.
Can you give me an instance and what led to that? Because that's quite an
I've been
interesting one.
sued
Why were you sued?
because somebody was referred to me by the WA police to help them. They were presenting some erratic behavior, and the police thought this gentleman needs help. And I got involved to help. And at the end of the day, I got sued with the accusation that I spoke, I hit them, I did this in the public space. And we had a video camera in these places. And the funny thing is, when we went to the court, and I told the judge, this is not me. I believe in integrity. That's one thing. That's the most important thing for me, is integrity. And no matter how angry I am, I don't think of those kind of reactions. And when the videos where the CCTV cameras were played, it was just a fabricated scenario. So those are things that you expect. They're like people saying, people from Liberia, where I come from, they accuse me and say, Joe had so much money when he was president of OAC, and he did not bring us along. And he enjoyed his money all by himself. So you expect to hear these things. But one thing that we don't understand is that this is Australia. The government would never give you their money for you to just misuse without accountability. If that was so, a lot of people wouldn't work. I have worked 2 jobs when I was president of OAC, and I have always worked. So if I was getting a financial benefit, I wouldn't have gone to work. But people will say these things, and you can't take it personal. all you need to do is to show to them that that's not true.
This scenario you've just painted, the one you're being sued, of course, the accusations and all of those, how did that affect you and your commitments to the service? Because I could tell most often than not, when these things happen, the natural human attitude to things, I'll just step back a bit. Because I didn't come to do this I didn't come to serve in order to be sued. So what was your reaction to all of this?
Those things didn't really move me, to be very honest. Even when I hear people say those things, they don't move me because the records are there. We get audited by independent auditors, okay? And you know Australia. If an auditor puts his hand out to audit you, he won't compromise anything. He will do it well. So these things, they don't move me. What inspired me instead is when people thought that OAC was my property, I wouldn't have left. That's how a lot of people thought. Joe won't leave OAC, it's for him. Whereas I was wanting from the very first time when the organization was up and running, I said, I'm out. I will work from the back. And a lot of reputable African elders, including non-African, prominent people in this society, came to me and told me, you need to make sure that this effort doesn't die down. It's too soon for you to leave. They talked to me, they encouraged me, and I decided to go for the second term. But today, I feel the beauty of legacy. I enjoy it because I don't make decisions in OAC now. But I do a lot of things from the back. I go to event, I set it up, I clean, I volunteer like any other person. Madam President and her team, they run the show. Because what it tells me is that leadership is something that you have to share with other people. And when you do so, it gives you the strength. So I feel honored when I get a call from Dr. Casti, from other African leaders to say, look, Joe, we want to do this. How do we do it? I think it's a good feeling.
Do you ever feel misunderstood as a leader?
Even in your home, people misunderstand you. I did so many times I felt misunderstood because some people thought that I was there for the show. Or this man just want to be here and there, here and there. Some people felt that I was benefiting so much. And there was a lot of things that people thought about me, and which it's not. Some people even thought that Joe was not approachable. But for you and too many people that knew me, when they get to know me, they're kind of, okay. I didn't have a time frame to say, I don't want to be called this hour of the day, this time of the week. My phone was there. In fact, people who don't have my number in their phone, when I ring them, it comes at Organization of African Community. But what people didn't understand, and I would like people to understand, is that it is not about Joe. It's about us tomorrow. Emmanuel, let me give you one example. There were men and women in our community. When we came here, they were young and vibrant. But when you see them today, they are almost retiring. Yeah. Have you thought, if they decide not to go back to their country of origin, particularly for those who cannot go back to their countries, have you thought what will become of them in the aged years here Have you thought about that? Those are the things that we thought about from the very onset when we made this decision to establish the OAC. If you go around here, most of the nursing homes that we work in, they are Italian, they are for this church, they are for this community. When I visit African seniors or Africans at hospitals, they turn out to want to eat the hospital food. They always want their own food to come. So when an African is taken to the aged care here, if he's alone, you don't expect the entire aged care facility to change their routine because of him. He will have to fit in. And that struggle at that age to want to fit into something is a difficult challenge. Those are the things that we're looking at. We want to make sure that when the television is turned on, we can see our young men and women. None of our young people can be inspired today and say, look, I saw this person who is a journalist or who is a news reporter or who is doing this, who is an African, and they inspire me. We are not visible. That's why we contribute a lot. And we can only be visible when we work together collectively. Individually, we can do well at our workplaces. If I tell you how many Africans here are doing very well in their daily lives, you won't believe it. But as a community, collectively, we are not.
How far away are we from working together? Because this feels like a cliche now. Africa unites, Africa this, one Africa that, one currency this, one currency that, even from back home as well. But I'll limit it to Australia, where we currently live. How far are we from actualizing that?
We are very far away. Why? I will just give you the scenario based on Western Australia. A lot of Africans here think there are classes of Africans. People think there are people who came as refugees, people came as skilled migrants, and some people came here as students. And these people, there's an issue of class here. What impacts those people who came here as refugees don't impact those people who came here as skilled migrants, or those people who came from stable countries that can return anytime. So those people who cannot go back easily to their own countries, they turn toward building that vibrant African community that even if they age here, they can feel at home. Then the other people, they think, oh, look, they should be able to manage it themselves. But if we all understand one thing we have in common, we are Africans. If my son is a responsible citizen and he meets your daughter, you have no fear. But if my son is not a responsible citizen and your daughter brings my son, you like or not, you cannot stop them, but you will have sleepless nights. So when we start to think this way, then we will come together and start working together. Because there are a lot of things that we need to do for our community. When you want to know that we have a lot of challenges, people like myself who get called for everything, I'm speaking to people who are in the hospitals, who have permanent disability, who are amputated, who need those services. They're not getting the services. They are struggling. They are crying on me. They are crying on Dr. Casti. They are crying on their community leaders. And who do we turn to? So it's a reality. It's a reality. There are a lot of people in our community who are hopeless because of situations. And they crown us. And every time they crown us, it motivates us, but it also frustrates us. It also puts fear in us. I was just talking to a beautiful young lady while coming. This young lady, she used to do a lot of things in the media. And I did some things with her. And her life just changed. And today she's not well. And she's not getting the help she needs. She's tried everything. And being a father myself, when I see this young lady's situation, I'm thinking of my daughter. I'm thinking of my younger sister. So when we put this into a big picture, we're wanting to build a community where people like this can have a safe haven. They can run to and say, I'm going to my people. I'm going to my community. So imagine if we had an African center here, if we had our own aged care home here, if we had our own facilities where these people, we can support them, then we start to understand, or we start to believe that we are here and we are fitting in. But at this stage, we are far from fitting in. And this is not about the government, but it's about us. Because there are so many educated people among us. In fact, the Africans are the most educated group of migrants to come to this country in recent years. And amongst us, the Nigerians are the most educated group of Africans. And if you see, even our individual communities, how we are struggling there, that you know, it means that we need to re-strategize.
What should be the message to us as individuals? So you just hit a very key point. I didn't know that actually. I know in the US, we've got to start and things like that, but I want to assume that globally, Africans, we go to school, particularly for Nigerians. The parents always say the best legacy they can give to you, the best gift they can give to you is the gift of education. And so every parent, you must go to school. You can decide what you're going to do afterwards. But what would be your message to the individual African migrant, in relation to what you've just said, collaboration? What should I could talk to me as an individual within the community? What are the things I need to do in order for us to actualize this oneness you're talking about?
The first thing is we need to stop thinking like we are special class than other people. We need to feel like we are Africans, and no matter where you come from in Africa, we are African. Second, we need to stop blaming people who are in leadership. Oh, I can't go there because Joe is there, or Joe's style of leadership, this person's style of leadership. When you come with genuine spirit to contribute, you're not coming because of Joe. You got a purpose that you came with. Whether you like Joe or not, you will still make your input because Joe is not there forever. The third thing is we need to learn to volunteer. Volunteering is not something that we do in Africa. It does not come to us naturally. We also need to put this position aside. Status, position, does not define you here. Your status or position does not define you here. I've gone to volunteers with Australian institutions where you got doctors, you got ex-ministers, you got these people, and they are doing the same thing with you. If we start to do these things, then we all come into the table to discuss. Because Joe, being the leader, he's alone. He cannot overrule everybody. We need to also understand that our individual communities, when they are stronger, then we can have a strong African community. The OAC can only be strong when there is a strong Liberian community. The African community can only be vibrant when there is a strong Congolese community. So our tribal conflicts, our fight for homes, they have to stay there. Because if you look at Africa, we got 50 some more countries. And each of those countries has got somebody here in WA. Each of those countries, even if it's a person, they have got them in WA. And most of us won't go back. We will stay here. So what becomes of us if we stay here? Do we want to continue to blame the system and blame the government in our old age? When the Italians came here to build their own community center, they build their own aged care homes, they open their own business, they open their own restaurants, they supported their kids. We need to have a constituent.
You've talked about a community center quite a lot in this conversation. Where are we on that?
Currently, the OAC is putting things together to do fundraisers to build an African-owned center here. The president has the blueprint. She's lobbying around states and federal government officials to see if they can support the ideology of having an African center here. I know there are other communities who have also conversing to have their own centers, which is good. I also think that having one African center here at the time, whether it's north of the river, and see how we manage that, and do one side of the rivers, and start thinking about graduating from just a center to an aged care facility, to an old age facility, to a youth facility, to a place where we can go and feed at home is very important. Because to maintain a center is not a very cheap one. I gave you one scenario with the Italians. When Magnahan was the Minister of Multicultural Interest, there was a conversation that we had. Just in City of Sterling, I think there are 3 Italian community centers there. And then on Fitzgerald Street in Perth, there's another 4th one there. What happens is that this generation of these Italians now, they are more integrated. So those community facilities, most of them are not getting used. They are there. And to maintain it, it's getting very expensive for those communities. So when we start looking ahead, if all of us can have our individual communities, a time will come that we will not be able to maintain it. So having something from a bigger picture and being able to maintain it and setting the structure that will be inclusive and being able to support everybody will be good for us.
Are you seeing a therapist currently, Joe? Are you seeing a therapist? Or have you seen anyone lately?
No.
Any reason for that?
No.
Do you think men don't need to see therapists?
We do.
Okay.
I do a lot of conversation with elders, which is very good for me. I also speak to a lot of young people. I talk a lot to people. I do a lot of exercises as well. But I talk a lot to people. I always want to learn from people. I want to learn from people's experience. I want to hear from people how they perceive things, why they do certain things. And like what we do, the amount of phone calls we get every day. I could get a phone call tomorrow morning about a man who has been picked up and put in prison, and his parents want to talk to him. They're not reaching him. How do we go with this? I could get a phone call tomorrow about somebody who is in the hospital and needs help. I could get a phone call tomorrow about a person who is the wife or the husband wants them to sell their property because they are separating from each other. How do we do it? Those things, they are therapy for me. Even my own children, my own home. I would go to schools to talk to young people. Schools would call me, this child is doing this, is doing this. And when I talk to these young people, when I talk to these schools leaders, I'm learning.
Does that replace? So I spoke with one of our last guests. I did ask him same question. If he's seen a therapist, he works, and from conversation he's tended towards always working late night and the stress of working. This country is stressful. It's very stressful, and of course having to feed and do what you need to do and still be present can take a lot of toll on us mentally. And I was like, are you saying one? He said, no. Why? Because he doesn't understand yet how rather therapy would be of help to him. Do you think that statement is correct?
For me, therapy is very helpful. It's very, very helpful. I'm married to a non-African person, and my wife has been a big support as well. With her, I have learned how to prioritize and structure certain key components of my life, like my children, my family. They are number one to me. So I got 3 young children here, just spending these days with them and doing things with them. They're at therapy on their own. Monday and Tuesday, I go to soccer with my 9-year-old son. When he's playing, when he's training for an hour, I take that hour to walk around the soccer pitch. And when we're going home, we are conversing. When we come in, we are conversing. So, and I go for holidays a lot. I get away a lot. And that's one of the way I recover. Take my family away and go out of Australia, relax myself, enjoy good food, and do some different things.
What does it mean to have a seat at the table? And do you think the African community, in WHO really has one yet?
Look, like I said, we need to achieve collectively. You see, there's something they call meritocracy. People say, Emmanuel writes this exam and he comes for interview, and based on his interview, we reward him the job. One thing I can tell you today, where there is human element, there is always subjectivity. And what we need a sponsor at the table. If we were sitting down here for an interview and we receive 20 jobs application, and you just took one and read it and said, this is a brilliant one. This gentleman is fantastic. I've heard about him. I've seen some of his work, and reading about him is just great. So if we are 5 sitting on the table, you have already conditioned our mind. Our minds now will be wanting to see this gentleman, and when we start discussing him, you will put a case on the table. And that's what happened to democracy. And that's what happened to anywhere where you build a system on merit. In this country, we need that sponsor at the table who can talk for us, who can advocate for us, who can put our cases to the people who make decisions. If I would tell a police officer, when you pulled me over with my wife, do not talk down to me. When you do, as an African man, I have to talk to you to show some sort of manhood. He's not understanding it. Because our culture, you don't talk down to a man in front of his wife, in front of his children. So when we have somebody at the table, when things like that are brought forward, they take time to explain. They take time to explain and say, look, this is why this person reacted like this. When you do like this the next time, they won't have that reaction. When a police officer walks up to you and says, hello, my brother, how you doing? You feel you have the obligation to respond to him peacefully. But when he comes right by the book, you get defensive. So but he's not doing it with any malicious intent. That's how he was trained. That's how he was brought up. That's how the system works. And because we are a multinational country now, we need people at the table at all areas so that people can understand, even the way we process things. We talk loud, particularly with the West Africans.
Yep. Yes.
We are loud talkers. And when we are talking loud, people think that we are fighting. People think that we are aggressive. People think that we are angry. But when my African brother is talking loud to me, I'm not feeling that way. So when somebody is at the table that knows you, that person is saying, no, that's how he talks. Give him a chance. He's not angry. He's not doing any wrong. Immigration is one of the areas. These days, we don't talk to anybody in immigration except by phone calls. And when you call, the time you wait is so long that you even get frustrated. Who making a decision there? How many people from our community is involved in decision-making in immigration? Some of the things they ask for, which is not wrong, we don't have them in our countries. Some of the documentation, some of the things they ask for, it is impossible for us to produce it. Because that's not how many of our parents really kept money in the bank? People inherited lands. Yeah. Everything there is cultural and traditional. So if I want to bring my poor mother here who does not read and write, and the immigration is requesting those things that are very impossible to achieve, we need somebody at that table. We can tell them, you can't do this with somebody from Liberia. You can't be expecting this from somebody from Nigeria. We need people at the table, not just at one table, at all decision-making tables. And when we have these people, then we start to feel we are African Australian.
Okay. Now that question has been answered. That question has been answered. Now, there's this, at the last election, we had two candidates from the African descent vying for, it was a seat in, I'll mention their names, Aly and Felicia Adeniyi. And there were speculations that the organization supported one against the other. Is that true?
Look, you see, this is a beautiful question. Aly, I think she was born in Egypt or Morocco. Egypt. Okay, one of those areas. A fantastic woman who has been a lecturer at the university here. Aly has been one of the driving forces behind the African community before she got into politics. I told you there was an African community here before. When you talk about people who wrote these policies and other things in WA before on inclusion and diversity and other things, you talk about Kasta Tungaraza, Aly, Kati Hollander. Kati was from South Africa, Kasta was from Tanzania, and was from Egypt, and even someone like Maria Usman, the one who served as director for OMIN before. So those are people who had strong network in the African community, particularly amongst those who've been here a long time. In fact, Anne used to teach the IEC English program for newly arrived migrants while she was doing her PhD, and even worked at OMIN before, okay? Now, come Felicia, somebody close to me who I call sister, a very strong mover and shaker, who she and we have very similar view on immigration and other things that we talk and we do a lot together. Now, the both of them contesting on the same position. There's nothing wrong with it. And once we get to that place now, people have to choose individual parties to support. It's no longer about Anne, it's no longer Felicia. the OAC is a non-political institution. The OAC cannot support any one candidate or any one party. We work with the government of the day. When the OAC was established, it was the Labour government. At that time, Colin Barnett was the premier. Every Labour African here said that OAC was Labour. Because at the time you had most of the parliamentarians to be laborers, and they were very regular at our events. A lot of people accuse me of being laborer. And they fail to realize that Margaret Quick, who was the mayor for Gary Wynn, was my personal friend. Janine Freeman, who was in Mirabuka, was my personal friend. But we had to work with the government of the day. So OAC would have not supported Anne over Felicia. No. In fact, there was a post for Anne Ali. I think she met with Dr. Casti. She went to her and said, "What do you want when I win?" And they had the conversation. And Anne posted something. I got a lot of calls saying that Casti have chosen Anne over Felicia. But one of the key players in OAC, which is Manana Johnson, was the campaign chair for Felicia. Manana is one of the key players in the OAC. She was the campaign chair for Felicia. She was all over Felicia. I stay apolitical. I've always stayed apolitical. If I'm invited to come to your campaign thing and I want to come, I will come. And the reasons that I have stayed apolitical, that's one of the reasons, because once they see me here today, they will say the OAC has. And with those kind of wrong information going out, it keeps other people away from coming. In fact, when the Susan Ley, who is the opposition leader, when she visited Western Australia at the Basildon Hotel, I was invited by my sister Felicia, and I attended. And I was the one who introduced and spoke about her. Did somebody tell you that? I saw. This is on record. I did. So anybody who tells you that the OAC endorsed one candidate over their friend, I'm telling you, Manana Johnson, who is one of the key persons in OAC, was visible with Felicia.
So where did that notion come from?
Because many of the time when people go to these events, they see more government officials from the labor. Because when you look in WA today, the laborers are struggling. We don't even have laborers parliamentarians now. It is just these elections that we have Basil Zempler and a friend they call Adam Hoff, who used to be with the city of Gosnell. Now he's the mayor for Kalamanda. And I think one or two. But previous to that, the last government, we didn't have a lot of people from labor. So we have an obligation, it's not a choice, an obligation to work with the government of the day. We also have an obligation to make sure when we have events or when we are in the public space, we should invite both parties. So that notion, it is not true.
There's been a lot of call to cut down immigration. And of course, we've got the African violent thing, every little thing about an issue, you talk about the African migrants and things. What do you have to say to that?
Africans are not violent. African migrants are not violent. I can tell you, we are making significant contribution to this country. It is just unfortunate that we don't tell our own stories. It's just unfortunate that we don't tell our own stories. And sometimes it's just the ugly stories that get run with. January this year, I won the City of Citizen of the Year awards. And that award has been all on Channel 9 and all over the place. It has highlighted some of the contributions I've made, that the OAC has made. I know a year ago, Dr. Pedros, won the City of Swam Citizen of the Year. And there's so many beautiful stories out there that we can tell. But until we start to tell our own stories, again, as a collective, now I'm telling a Liberian story, a Nigerian story, a Zambian story, but I'm telling our stories as collective. Every time one or two of our sons are involved in antisocial behavior, it will take the media. And what it does, the danger of it is that it makes ordinary citizens who want to accept us to fear us. I was walking to the shop one Sunday afternoon. I've just moved to Baladura, and I saw this older woman. And I was going towards her, then she held her bag very firm. So I went and I said, hello, when does the shop closes here? It was on the weekend. And she was shivering. She said, oh, then I went. When I went, the shop was closed. Coming back, she was still walking. When she saw me, then she held her bag and she started walking. So I walked faster. And I said, hello, madam. She said, oh, what's happened? I said, it seems to be you are afraid. She said, yes. I said, why? She said, the news. I see a big African man like you walking with muscle arm and nobody is around, I'm afraid. So I said, can I get a hug? She said, yeah. I said, I am here to protect you. I got mother, I got grandmothers. I can't harm you. Not every African is harmful. I said, I told her I live in that house. That's my address. I live there with my wife and children. 2 weeks later, it was Christmas. That lady brought a card and put it in my mailbox. Every time she would bring something and put it in my mailbox. So until we can start to tell our stories, so our fellow Australians can understand that amongst us there will be sons and daughters who will be involved in antisocial behavior, just like any other community. But there are so many of us doing great things. That way, we can start calling ourselves African Australians because our fellow Australians trust us. They are happy to live with us. They don't have that fear for us. But every time they watch those things on the news, if you are neighbor to them, they intensify their fears. So we need to have a platform that we can tell our own stories. Not individual stories, but our own stories.
On that, you just mentioned platform, and I recall they always had a studio, and one of the core aim of that studio, at the time it was set up, was to amplify stories like this. What is the fate of that studio now?
We struggled to maintain the studio because of the venue. The venue was small, and when we got the new place from the city of Sterling, the government gave some money to the city of Sterling to renovate this area. So we thought the renovation would have been faster because the city of Sterling told us, you have to leave once the place is done. So we broke the studio down because we did a partition in there. You know, a lot of things you done here with your studio. That was a similar thing we did over there. So we dismantled all those things and kept the gears. Now that we have Nalamara, there's a designated room, a decent area. So currently we're trying to reinforce the security because it's that place is very public. There's been a lot of break-in over the time. So we are trying to secure the area. Once the place is secure, that studio will reopen.
What has Fatherhood or family taught you about leadership?
I will meet you one day. I got a story to tell you about my first daughter.
Can you tell me on this podcast? I'd like to hear it here, Joe.
I was in Guinea, and I I had a daughter. And when this daughter was born, I was denied this daughter.
How old were you then?
I was in my late 20s. I was denied this daughter. And that was in 2006. And I came at 2008. But I have always insisted, because there were dreams, there were things that I felt that this child was my child. But the mother said, you are not a father. And you know, in our African setting, it's the mother who determines the father of the child. In 2008, I reached a resolution with the mother. I said, I will look after this child until the facts come out. Because I don't want tomorrow, if she's my daughter, then the fact does, it comes out, and I have not done anything for her. So for those years, I never spoke to that girl, but I kept supporting her. Unfortunately, about 5 years ago, the mom passed away. But during all those times, I never knew why the mother denied me this child. When the mom passed away, I sent my relative to go and sympathize. The mom was from Guinea. So when they went there, that's how I was informed that this child was given to another man, and she was carrying this man's name. And after the mother died, I still didn't communicate with this child till early 2024, when one of the distant uncles helped me to start communicating with this child. So I flew to Africa last year to go and meet my daughter for the first time in Guinea-Conakry. So we met. And she's now a third-year student at the university in Conakry. And she had a lot of questions to ask me. Why? And I explained to her. And when I came back, I compiled all the communication evidence that I have been supporting her and sent to her. And then I commissioned a DNA here in Australia to send the kid, collected her sample, and she's 99.9% my daughter. And just as I speak to you today, just this morning, for the accredited immigration DNA, I was doing it this morning because I want to bring her here. I tell you this story to say there's no beautiful thing like fatherhood, because children are a gift from God. My 7-year-old daughter, she changed my perception about God's children. Coming up, my father and my sisters didn't have that cordial relationship. So I thought God's children had a problem. And my dream was to have all boys or more boys. Now, when I had my 7-year-old daughter, the affection, the care, the concern, even till now, made me to understand that the best thing that can happen to a man is to have children of his own, or to have a child who sees him as a father and show him that love. Because the love from your children, they are just exceptional. You are a father, you know that. Yeah. So fatherhood has not been difficult. I know they are still young, but we hope and pray that as they grow up, they won't cause us a lot of trouble. But at this stage, it has been beautiful.
What's one failure you regret, or you're grateful for, rather?
Look, I will tell you what I regret. I would have loved to have gotten married a bit earlier. I would have loved to have gotten married a bit earlier.
Why did you say so?
Because my wife has been a big support for me. And when I came to Australia, if I've had that partner, I would have done a lot than what I have done. But one thing as well that I'm proud of is the fact that I can be a family man. I think is very important for me because I have always loved to be a family man, to have my home of my own. That has been my dream. And I always wanted a person that we could communicate, a person that we could share that value of respect. And, sometimes your delay is not your denial. I would have loved to have gotten married earlier, but I think I didn't get married the wrong time. Yeah.
That's quite a profound one.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone I know that thinks he married too early. What would you say to that person?
Your upbringing determines sometimes your maturity. The way you come out, the home you come from, determines what you want to become. Yeah.
So is there any such thing as marrying too early?
Yes. If you don't know what you want, you can marry too early. Because marriage is not for boys. It's for men. So, but that doesn't have to be your age.
Okay.
You got to be prepared before you get married.
What sort of preparation?
To become a husband. Being a husband comes with responsibility. If you want to be free, hanging out, doing other things to places where you cannot account for, then you can marry. If you're not willing to share your resources, then you cannot marry. If you're not willing to be a father to your children, then don't marry. And that has nothing to do with age, because I've seen men older enough to be a husband or to be father who still struggle to be.
I still got questions, but time won't permit me to proceed. And this is quite an important place to end this conversation. I'd like to thank you for, joining me on this podcast. You've shared your heart. You've spoken deeply. I don't think I've heard some things you've said today. I've never heard it before. We've spoken a number of things. I've seen you speak at different places. Many of the things you've shared today, I've never heard you share any of those. So I am grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I just want to say thank you, and I hope you can continue on this and also be able to support the OAC when they open the studio. That we need to work together collectively so we can tell our stories.
You have my support. I'll give you every support. I'll give the OAC every support they need to get things going. Thank you. Thank you. We've got two last things we do. Now, the last guest, usually we leave a question for the next guest, not knowing who the person is, as well as you will leave a question for the next person, not knowing who the person is. And the question that was left for you was, is there something you want to achieve so bad, but you have not yet gotten to it? Ask yourself, how bad do you want it? So that question is, how bad do you want that thing? So is there a thing you want to achieve that you haven't gotten yet? Yes. And how bad? Yep.
I want to stop working for people. I want to do my own business. Not here, but in Africa. I want to get involved into a business that can impact the society in Africa.
Why not here?
Because Australia is self-sufficient with the skill set that I want to endeavor into. I want to open a biomedical engineering company. I've just been to Africa, done some feasibility studies, and currently I got something going on in 2 countries. It is something I dream to do, because when I went back home and looked at the medical gears and the conditions in some of the hospitals, as somebody who have worked in almost all the bigger hospitals in Western Australia for the past 17 years in different responsibilities, from being a full service attendant to my current role as a senior biomedical engineer, I think there are a lot our hospital need. And with some of the skills we have, we can help in that direction.
We didn't actually touch on your career, something I hope we could touch. But
I'm
I do
a
hope
father-in-chief. That's the most important career.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I also think putting that as a context does help the conversation, but that'll be a conversation for another day. My hope and my prayer is that you get to it as quickly as possible and your dream come true.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks so much, Joseph, for joining me on this podcast and becoming a CEO. It was such a pleasure having you. I do love all of our conversation. I know you, and I believe you love the conversation. I hope you derived as much value in this conversation as I did as well.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joseph. Looking forward to having you again next time.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks. As we wrap up this conversation with Joe, I am reminded that leadership isn't always born in comfort. Sometimes it is forged in struggle. Now, from the refugee camp of Guinea to the heart of Perth African community, Joe's story isn't just one of survival. It's one of purpose, resilience, and responsibility. Now, to every listener, whether you are an immigrant finding your place, or a leader trying to make a difference, or someone searching for meaning, remember this: your story matters. And sometimes the very thing that broke you might just be the one thing that builds others. I am Emmanuel, and this has been the Becoming a CEO podcast. Until next time, keep becoming.